But this workshop, I'm mostly trying to gonna focus on, building skills and working on your resumes, and what to kind of like, look for. I've already kind of talked a little bit about myself already, did some introductions and worked on coaching uh, quite a few people in the past. I'm professionally coaching as well. I try to like work together on a schedule, so you don't necessarily have to be in a U.S. time zone. I have people in India, Europe time zone as well. Since I am part of a global team, like I am up at 2 a.m. at night now. Um, again, some of the other things that I do talk about in my coaching sessions or in session that you book with me is that like if that's something that you want to do, is that do you want to pursue a path in SRE, for example, taking the SRE example, right, where you will get called at 2 a.m. at night. You have to pick that up, otherwise you have risked your job, and you could potentially and most likely will lose it, right? I have seen many scenarios where quite a few people have now woken up for a emergency call at 2 a.m. and you know people tend to people tend to lose jobs because of that. So things like that is something that I talk about as well in our coaching and the workshop. Where what are the expectations of that role? What do you want to see? But in a sense, I'll try to talk more about like ways to kind of like make your resume better, ways to kind of like do things in the online platforms and places where you can kind of submit for jobs and whatnot, and how to kind of like make yourself essentially stand out, and just different types of interview processes as well. I had an interview session that I had a couple weeks back where I was talking about how interviewing is important, and the different types of interviewing, like for example, behavioral interviews sometimes can be the key to getting a job compared to technical, right? Your technical could be amazing, but if you're horrible at behavioral, they can still reject you, right? If you're amazing in technical but great at behavioral, you know, it's a miss, right? Because if you're good at behavioral, that could indicate that they see that there's a technical gap. And a lot of times what us as managers do is that we try to see if this person is coachable, right? The keyword coachable. Can you be coached in that technical aspect that you're lacking? So that's why behavioral interviews tend to be a little more important than technical for a lot of the organizations nowadays, right? Is you can have a great technical person, but if that person doesn't have drive, motivation, and willingness to learn, then you know it could be a bad signs, and you could totally not get the job, for example. So that's why it depends on what organization, what level you're trying to get into. A lot of times if you're applying for a very senior role, right, behavioral becomes very important, because at that point a lot of managers, believe it or not, they hire senior or staff level engineers, and they're hiring with the mindset of, in a year or two, I want this person to be a leader in some aspect, whether if it's technical or if it's people leader. The goal is that I want this person to lead, and you cannot lead if you don't have behavioral, right? I mean, technical still weighs pretty heavy, right? But behavioral becomes more and more important as you go through your career. But if you're starting off, behavioral may not be as important, maybe 25% of the weight, but that percentage increases as you go through your career, right? You're entry level, then you become a mid, and then senior, and then after senior you become like super senior, for example, or staff, principal, whatever it may be, right? Different organizations have different leveling. So that's why that's important. And then we'll talk about some like questions and answers and things like that as well. So it's kind of like talking about behavioral, for example, right? It is important as a leader, or in just general sense, to be able to tell a story in a structural manner that kind of flows and works together with your technical expertise to kind of highlight the importance of how you made an impact. The keyword you, not the team, you made an impact. A lot of times all these behavioral interviews, you hear words like we, right? Me, my team, and I, we worked on this project. and my team ended up getting it done. We got it done. As a result, the team noticed a impact in cost reduction or a higher performance. That kind of just doesn't necessarily signify your contributions. So be very selfish whenever it comes to star methods, right? You want to be able to be in a position where you are telling them about your contributions, your work, and how you made a difference, especially in these star type of uh, behavior interviews, right? But believe it or not, most interviews are going to be some level of star. They're not. They probably may not enforce star, but they technically want a star type of answer, right? Where they want to know the situation, they want to know the background, and within during that time, they don't want you to be talking about like some non-generic background. They want to hear how technically sounded person are you, right? How technical can you sound whenever you're trying to explain a issue, right? And this goes a long way, right? Regardless of what career path you pick as an engineer, describing the problem becomes important because every single day you have to give an update as an engineer, right? Or every week, depending on the team you're in, right? The goal of that is to be able to provide context as to what you're working on and what the problem is, because you're going to be dealing with problems regardless where you are at, right? If you're an engineer or not, if you're some tech person, if you're working in finance, there's going to be problems. How effectively can you describe that problem is very key and important. And that's why they wanna hear how technically sound-minded are you, right? And then also like explaining the objective. So this right here, STAR methods, believe it or not, is an interview process, but this is something that you do as an engineer daily, right? These are, I mean, if you're not familiar with Agile, um, this is something that's incorporated into Agile in Scrum meetings, which happen daily, right? Every day. So stand up, doing stand up, you're talking about what did you work on, what are you working on today, and if you have any blockers, right? So you're usually saying, yeah, I'm working on this ticket for X, Y, and Z because um, it's part of this greater epic that's that's getting released this Friday, and I am working on these X aspect. I have worked on so far these X aspects, and so far, I don't have any blockers, for example, right? What you're doing is you're describing the task there. You are explaining your objectives, and you're talking about what actions you have taken, and the result may not be there yet, but then like towards the end, whenever you finish that ticket, you talk about the results and like whatnot as well. So like this star type of methodology kind of plays an impact even after you're interviewing because you're still talking about your problems or tickets and things you're working on. Um, so moving on from this, right? Um, that being said, before you even get to your interviewing phase, you still kind of have to like stand out, right? You want to be able to uh, catch the attention of a potential employer or a hiring manager, right, or recruiter, wherever it may be. And to do that, your goal should be to focus on a high quality, quantifiable description of your current roles and duties or past roles and duties. By quantifiable, I mean like, try to get into a habit of talking about the impact that you made through percentages, numbers, or things like that. That's very important. Just quantified, right? Something like while working on this project, I released two applications that went live and went through the production lifecycle and SDLC, right? Something that's quantifiable. Doesn't have to be percentages because a lot of times you can't necessarily get that percentages or talk about percentages until you're a lot more senior. But if you're very junior, you want to talk about quantifiable stuff. Talk about how many users did you have at the end of this project? What were the outcomes of this project? Um, and then within that outcome, talk about the impact that it made in terms of like the reach. Say like within the first day, I had 20 users signed up as a success metric, right? Because a lot of times, whenever you're talking about your achievements, you want to talk about how did you measure that that project was successful, right? A lot of times you can't necessarily measure everything in terms of success metric, but you can talk about the effects of that project, like the impact it made, and through that, like you want to talk about the tools and technology that you also use nowadays, right? There are a lot of job descriptions that I'm reading, right? we're looking to see how did you use X, Y, and Z tools and techniques within your project, and how well are you able to explain that, right? And you want to keep it very short. You want to keep it very clean and readable. What I mean by that is that, like, you don't want to be too wordy as well. You want to be like something that I can read straight up and be able to understand the technology used, the impact you made, and the work that was being done essentially. Um, for example, like, there's an example down there that talks about, like, working on a cloud system, which is very generic, right? But there's many ways of talking about working on a cloud system, right? There's current example that it talked about leading a team that reduced cloud costs by 20% through automation. That's one example, right? But you could also say things like, I worked with AWS to enhance the API system within the organization to improve the performances of the current RESTful API, right? Talking about, like, specific key technical terms like AWS APIs, your overall performances and things like that. Those are just very keywords that you want to focus on as well. And let's say it's not AWS, right? Let's say it's something else, or let's say you just built a application using AWS. Um, some people may say, yeah, I built an application using AWS. Instead of saying built an application using AWS, you could say something like, I I was able to build, a user-facing application with AWS Lambda, AWS API Gateway, and AWS S3 um, you know, uh, to have a front end, for example, right? That's something that's just coming into my mind right now, just out of thin air. I'm just making an example up, right? But once you write that down, um, you'll be able to kind of like understand the technologies and tools that you worked on, rather than just saying something simple. Try to grill down as much as you can, and try to explain technologies and tools and things like that, and try to focus on some heavy keywords as well. Um, that's usually the goal for LinkedIn, is because LinkedIn is very keyword driven um, platform. So try to focus on some keywords. And if you don't know what keywords that you're looking for, try to find your ideal jobs and look at the keywords in that, and try to find a um, kind of pattern, right? Well, what keywords are they looking for? What's their um, requirements for this job, or what's the role responsibilities, and just make a list of all the jobs with their roles, responsibilities, and requirements, and then you start figuring out the keywords that they're using more often, and you can start implementing those into your resume or LinkedIn profile. Um, but with that being said, right, also, what are the other things that you can do to just enhance your skills and overall career? Um, in general, you want to be able to be acclimated to some of the newest technologies and tools. If you don't want to be working on anything old, right, old school like COBOL and stuff like that, try to get into the newest things out there. Like, for example, there are AIs, for example, which is something that I talk about later on in this slides. Um, Try to familiarize with yourself with 1 to 2 programming languages, right? Definitely do Python, and do Java if you want, but Java is not necessary. You could also do C++ or C if that's something that you like. But those kind of get a little difficult because they're lower level languages. By lower level languages, I mean they're a little bit more closer to memory, and your overall, um, your overall syntactical applications and PCU boards. So you're talking about, opening up memory, freeing up memory, and things like that. Um, yes, I was reading the chat, and Mary said Java for banking, but also enterprise tech hires for Java. Yes and no. Java is good, but a lot of times, depending on the technology that you're working on, you may or may not use Java. You may use C, for example, not even C++, C. Um, because usually what happens is that, like, when you're writing code, a lot of it gets translated into a lower level language, like assembly, which then the machine can read, right? And usually Python is like up here in terms of, like, the language that is the highest in terms of um, you know um, the difference between being closest to the memory and assembly code, and then C is like down here, I guess. So C, C++, and then Java, and then Python, um, and that's just the order of it. And yes, startups do hire for new languages. Um, but yeah, so like also familiarize yourself nowadays with some sort of a cloud technology as well. Um, AWS is a really, really popular one. If you don't know how to, like, understand and use AWS, look at their white papers and API documentation. It can be hard to kind of, like, understand AWS, but there are a lot of different workshops and online courses that you can kind of like look into. I think there is a um, open source application that you can kind of download from GitHub. I don't have the link of it right now, but things called serverless frameworks on GitHub that you can kind of play around with and kind of like build your own um, cloud-based application. Um, and things like that are very important, especially for your resume and your current skill sets. Even if you don't have the necessary skills, try to understand the API docs for the cloud technologies at least, and try to implement something, work on a project or something, and just put that on your resume. And when they ask you about it, you can just say you worked on X, Y, and Z, and that kind of shows that, like, you took initiative and you took time to learn something new because it was interesting for you, and it was something that kind of gave you motivation and drive. These are things that are automatically assumed just because you worked on a random project just to get acclimated to cloud. And that's very important because, like, a lot of times in your work environment, you may not have an opportunity to learn something, right? But if you're doing that just because you had a free time, it kind of shows a potential employer a lot about your current state and how coachable, again, you are, which is going to be the overall arching theme as well that I'm going to be focusing on is being able to be coached. As much as I want to talk about coaching you guys, being coachable is also important. A lot of people are not coachable because they're too, I guess, egotistical, and they just cannot be coached no matter how hard you try. Because whatever reasons and um, issues they may have. But that's also important, right? Being able to be coached. But talking about coaching, right? It's also good to have a coach and a mentor alongside you outside of your organization, and that's something that I've spoke about in my last session as well, and that's very important, right? I don't know if you guys look into podcasts or a lot of different um, technical conversations on YouTube, or even hear different leaders from different organizations talk about their journey from where they were to where they're at now. And you will always hear somebody talking about having a mentor and a coach outside of their organization because that's unbiased, point of view that they will give you. This unbiased opinions and unbiased coaching and mentorship versus somebody within your organization. They may, even though they may not, be a bad person, they will still somehow, some way will have some sort of bias, some sort of opinion, and understanding of the organization. And it's good to have somebody outside of the organization that gives you a view of what's possible and what's out there. Because bringing outside views is very important within your project and within your organization. Because a lot of times, believe it or not, you will be working on things or be with a mentor or coach within your organization that may not see it the way the person from outside sees it, right? They may be only constricted to only seeing X and only X, but somebody outside of your organization can see A, B, C, D all the way to X, Y, Z, right? And that's very important as well. It's a different point of view. It's a second opinion. It's good to have, and a lot of times, most successful people ideally have a coach or mentor. Um, I mean, it's hard to comprehend that because it took me a while to comprehend that as well. But believe it or not, like if you have a really good best friend and that's somebody that can help you like talk about some technical challenges, ways to outperform yourself, and ways to advance your career, then talk to them, make them your coach, make them your mentor. I mean, just don't tell them. Just always talk to them and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Because then if you tell them they're your official coach or mentor, they feel like they have some sort of obligation. Um, but yeah, it's good to have that conversation. It's very important, and it's good to kind of like have an understanding from an outside point of view. Moving on, talking about some things that I mentioned, right? AWS Cloud, like Boto 3 is a Python-based library, a very good library. That's something that I use a lot, even till now. Um, so that's a really good library, and it's very easy to navigate too. So you just go into Boto 3, look into the different services like Lambda, S3, for example. Just look at those two, and also look at API Gateway because those are like the top three most utilized one. Lambda mostly because like serverless, right? Anything that touches Lambda is serverless. There are arguments out there that could say, oh, you can make Lambda non-serverless, which is true, right? Because Lambdas can run for 15 minutes, and after 15 minutes, you can spin up another Lambda that picks up from that past Lambda. But then that's a lot of cost. Nobody wants to do that. If you want a continuous running server, you get a EC2, right? Elastic Cloud Storage. That's what EC2 stands for. Um, and then S3. I think is simple storage service. That's why S3, because three S's, right? But yeah, there's all these little terms and things like that um, that kind of tell you about like what that service does. And Boto 3 is a very good one. So understanding that is very important. You can also get certs, but that's not necessarily important as much as your skills are important, right? I have met people with certs that do not know the very fine intricacies of AWS as much as somebody that has the knowledge of Moto 3 or has the knowledge of the white papers from AWS. Just because you got searched doesn't mean anything, but like, what gets tested is your skills in AWS, not your certs during interviews. That's what outshine, right? I don't have any certs. I'm gonna be honest. I don't have any AWS certs, but am I more knowledgeable than people with certs? Oh, 110%. I can tell you that right now. Um, and that's something that I've always argued about, and I, continuously till this day talk to quite a few people with certs that may or may not have knowledge of certain things. The key is to have the skill, not necessarily the cert. Getting the cert is important. It just shows and strengthens your knowledge, but focus on getting the knowledge, not necessarily just the cert. Uh, if you do that, like you may have the knowledge for a couple of days, weeks, or you may just find the test bank somewhere to study for the certs, but that doesn't necessarily help you answer interview questions or showcase your skills. So yeah, AWS is important, like hot topic, right? AWS, Gen AI, um, and working on something like hackathons and open source, those are things that I am very involved in. I am currently a judge in a hackathon I'm leading right now, um, which I need to score. I need to score the hacks before 12 tonight. So that's what I'll be doing. So um, if you're into hackathons and want to know more about it, message me and I can kind of guide you. And also, if you want to do some sort of project, let's say you don't have any projects right now with AWS or Gen AI, reach out. I have quite a few opportunities that I can work with you on, and help you kind of collaborate in open source projects. My goal is to be able to help you. Um, to be able to kind of like put that into your resume as well and showcase that. Even if you may have a job already, it's good to get involved in open source community as a developer, as an engineer, to always be, up and aware about the different best practices. A lot of organizations nowadays are moving into open source because they realize the potential and power of it. And a lot of you guys don't realize this, that you have that available to you right now before you even get a job, or let's say you even have a job right now but you want to elevate yourself. It is very important to get involved into open source communities, and start working on some tickets, easy ones, not difficult ones. Just look for something easy, right? And or let's say those tickets are not available, build something for them and say, hey, is this is something that I built, I think may be valuable to you, you want to implement this into your repo. And a lot of times you may get a no, sometimes you may get a yes, depending on the person and what they see that project as. So I have that available right now. I'm also leading a open source community as well. And hackathon, that's something that I'm constantly involved in. Why? Because those are what the community is moving towards more of, right? Whatever organization that you look at nowadays are into open source, and that's something that is going to elevate your skills even more, right? If you were to talk about your open source contributions, and I'm about to pick a candidate between you and a person that has a whole bunch of certs, right? I'll most likely pick the person who has contributions in open source and is knowledgeable about the AWS landscape in terms of the APIs than the person with the certs, because that shows more drive and passion than the person with the certs. Because a lot of people get certs just to get certs, just to say, like, it's like a little star on your shoulder that just says, yeah, I have like 5 stars, versus a person who actually is in the battlefield fighting, I guess, is the example I'm using in terms of military aspect of stars, right? Um, but yeah, so like get involved into that, and that's also going to help you elevate your career, help you elevate your resume, and showcase your drive and motivation. So that's very important. Besides that, in terms of interviews, behavioral mostly is looked for. In terms of, like, stars and star method, for example. And practicing this is not going to be difficult, but just having those social skills in general and being able to tell a story, it's good, right? You don't necessarily have to practice with a friend. You can always record yourself, and you know I don't know about you guys, but I judge myself pretty harshly. So recording myself helps me. So, like, that's something that I can do is I can record myself and practice a sample interview response. But, a lot of times I'm practicing interview responses and then I go to the interview and then none of those questions were asked. That doesn't mean that effort went to, shit. It's still it's still something that helped me practice general storytelling. Focus on on the main skeleton of behavioral interviews, right? Which is to be able to tell a story based on situation, tasks, actions, and results. Technical interviews are more focused on speaking out your thoughts and trying to understand how your brain kind of navigates a challenge or a problem, right? Whether if it's coding challenge, if it's algorithm, right? A lot of times they will put a problem in front of you, and a lot of times interviewers just stay quiet and then kind of like, code through. But um, if you were able to kind of speak out your mind, it's something that can help you, um, get the job, for example. And then I think Zarmin just said, would we be able to get a slides and recording? Just message me after this, and I'll be able to see what I can do. Um, with that being said, practice is important. So practice your coding skills, practice your behavioral interview skills. Um, there's opportunities out there, right? Such as on Leland, you can book some time with me, and then we can kind of like do a practice interview, whether if it's technical or behavioral. I can kind of run through a sample of how we do it at my organization and how I have done it in the past. And try to be very strategical with this, right? You want to be able to practice and you want to be able to uh, be ready for an interview, whether if it's for a technical or non-technical role. It's important to be ready And always like try to figure out the um, questions they can ask just by the job description, right? That's another thing that I usually would do if you and I were to book a time. I would like to request a job posting, and then based on that, I can ask questions regarding that job posting. So it's not going to be just like random questions. It's going to be questions that's going to be relative to that. um, Again, preparation, being specific, and just storytelling, something that I've been saying quite a lot. I'm going to skip this. At this time, I think I'm just going to leave it open, um, go past a little bit of the time as well, and just open it up for questions, comments, and see what you guys have to say. I think Mary has been pretty active as always, so I appreciate you, Mary. Um, yes, recruiters do prefer projects instead of certs, um, because certs are cool, but certs can only get you so far, right? Projects are something that can help you explain your skills and help you um, explain your overall approach to problem solving and your ability to be coached. Again, that's something that's important. So being able to be coached is something that is looked for by recruiters and hiring managers quite a lot. Um, there may be a requirement for some job postings that require certs, but I've seen quite a lot of people that have been hired for a job that required a cert, based on their skills, right? Mary, you can speak or
Yeah,
text.
thank you so much for doing this session because I'm a little bit in this stage. I already tried actually, like I've been going to job fairs in connecting with recruiters at certain specific companies. And I've already gotten an offer and like passed some of the technical interviews up to a certain level, but
Hmm.
I've just been using this kind of like as a test to benchmark like where I can enter, like how I can enter, right? I'm kind of like testing out the process because I don't have like the actual background
Hmm.
to be in this type of career field. I have like maybe some analyst type of background, management type of
Right.
background, but I come from a different career field, right? So I'm learning some of this stuff. I'm learning by myself, like I'm self-learning. Some of this stuff I'm doing through like university, and going back to school and all of these type of
Right.
things. So I'm trying to build up the history that will match for some of these applications. So like when you're talking about coachability, what exactly are they looking for about being coachable? Like when we're in the interview with somebody.
So good question. And so far it seems like you've been going to school and doing all these extra stuff, which is good. I'm not gonna say don't go to school to anybody, but again, all this stuff is online. No need for school. Don't waste your money on anything. Um, it's better if you just watch a YouTube video, because I'm pretty sure in universities you only get one professor and one professor only, that can only teach one way. But online, you reading some of the design docs, API docs, right? Just read through them. Um, Go through like a online learning guide. Once like my headphones almost died, but I have multiple. Hello? Okay, there you go. Okay, team discussion, joining communities has been allowed. Yeah, of course. Like again, don't waste your time, energy going to school. Instead, like focus on building the skill. working on open source. Again, I'm not gonna stop talking about open source because the value in open source is so much more than school will ever be, right? In open source, you can actually work on stuff that you will basically be working on at a typical software engineering role. And that can give you an understanding of how well you would do, right? And that will set you up for a better success than actually going to school. Um, and that's one of the biggest reasons, right? That a lot of these, um, industry leaders have been saying, "Don't go to school. There's no need for a degree. There's no need for this. There's no need for that." And people still try to get a degree, and the reason for that is because a lot of engineers have realized that the drive and the passion and coachability comes from within. So that's why being coachable is a lot more important, which has led industry leaders to stop looking for degrees, but rather look for people who are coachable a lot more. And what I mean by coachable is that how easily is this person willing to take initiative, willing to take, you know, a ambiguous problem and come up with a solution that may solve the problem or not. Or let's say they take an ambiguous problem and they're able to ask the right questions, right? Being coachable is being open to learning, being driven to learn, being able to have the potential to adapt and conform into the team's environments, team's technical abilities, right? Being coachable is being able to fit into the team and learn from the team, be able to grow yourself, grow your knowledge, grow your skill sets. That's being coachable, right? And if you can do that, a lot of times, you may get selected and you may not meet all the requirements, but the manager or the recruiter sees that you're coachable, so they will hire you and they will skill you up themselves because that's a lot more important is being able to be coachable, right? Are you able to be someone that is able to learn quickly and learn with passion because based on your resumes, I can see that you have taken initiative to join these open source communities, do all these projects because you took initiative, right? That's why that's even more important than certifications. Certifications are things like, getting degrees nowadays. As much as certifications are cool, they're I feel like, I'm gonna be like, a little outlandish here and just say that certifications are as equal as getting a degree, right? A lot of people do it just to do it, right? And that's it. But that doesn't mean that they are the perfect candidate. Just because you have a degree doesn't mean you're going to be the best engineer, which is why that requirement has kind of gone away for software engineering because um, there are people out there who I have seen start their career as musicians, and over time they have learned to code, and they were coding in the background for a little bit, building little Python scripts, building a little website here and there, and then over time they started to join open source communities, and then they start to build and develop and this and that, and then as their music career progressed, they started finding themselves liking software engineering more and more and more. Um, and now they're the best developer I know. And this is actually talking about a person that I personally know and I work with. Uh, the most insane, craziest programmer out there that I know. Really good programmer. Um, it's crazy because he used to be a musician, and that's something that he went to school for. But his ability to have initiative, drive, and passion, and just overall a positive mindset showed that he is coachable, right? That he can join our organization and learn all these tools, technologies, and different types of solutions that we have. One of the reasons why I'm saying coachable is because let's say you get a interview at Amazon, right? Let's say you are applying for Amazon, you got an interview for Amazon. Amazon doesn't care what language you code in, they will tell you to code in whatever language, right? You can pick Python for all they care as long as you can code, right? What they're truly looking for is how your mind thinks. How coachable are you, right? And they do that by having these 10 round interviews. And during technical interviews, right, if you're one of those people that just likes to stay quiet, you will most likely get rejected at Amazon 100%, right? Because during those times, being able to speak and talk through your code helps them understand how coachable you are. And the reason why I'm bringing Amazon up as an example is because at Amazon, you may have gotten an offer because you coded in Python, but once you join Amazon, everything that you know about software engineering and the skill sets that you have can change based on the team that you're in. Just because you know Python doesn't mean that the team will be using Python. Matter of fact, that's usually not the case. A lot of people got an interview, got job offer because they wrote the code in Python, but they are now writing Java. Now they're writing JavaScript, or now they're writing something in Ruby, right? That's how it is in Amazon. A lot of people will like, get an interview and pass the interview and get into the organizations using Python, but 90% of the time, that's not the language that you'll be using at Amazon at all. It's going to be a complete opposite. All the tools are going to be different because Amazon doesn't believe in using all these tools that's available. They have their own tools for everything. Uh, and that's why once you join Amazon, it's kind of difficult to leave because you don't know how to put those tools into your resume that can translate into the industry tools. 'Cause tools for everything, right? They don't have the typical Confluence that they have their own internal thing for that. They don't have the typical Jira board. They have their own version of that. Everything they they have their own version of it. Uh, and that's why, like, Amazon is a great example here. Is that they look for coachability a lot more than any other company because they know during the interview process that you will not be using that language at all. And being coachable there means that, like, hey, can this person join my team and learn my technology stack? Can this person pick up and be able to contribute? How is this person going to be able to join our team and make a difference? That's why coding, for example, is very tricky at Amazon, right? You will not be coding in Python at all if that's the language that you pick to code in during the interviews. Um, Most likely you'll probably be coding in like Java or JavaScript, for example. Um, so yeah, that's like being coachable, and Amazon is notorious for that. Same thing with Microsoft too. Oh, mostly most banks actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, Google, Netflix. Um, they will give you a coding challenge that you can do in whatever language. You can literally write it in. I think what was it, Ruby, I think, was one of the languages that I saw. I think it was Ruby, yeah. Um, and they don't use Ruby at all, right? And but that's the language that they can skill see. Yeah, they will allow you to code in during the interviews, and during that time, they're not necessarily looking to see how well you know Ruby, how well do you know Python, but how well can you explain the problem and walk through the problem and solve it, right? Can you answer the questions that I'm about to ask you after you have solved it, right? Like you solve a problem in whatever language, they'll be like, "Hey, so this is a good solution. It works, but can you make it faster? Can you make it better? How would you do that, right?" So whatever solution you give them, you're gonna have to change it up to make it faster. You have to change it up to make it better, and that's part of the interview process too. And the reason for that is because they're trying to see how would you think through that problem now, this new challenge, um, and be able to see if you're able to navigate code in general. So that's what I mean when I say coachability. It's a very key factor, and it's very important. Um, so having that understanding is very important, and being able to be open to it and being able to have that shown in your resume by taking initiatives, taking different opportunities, being part of something that you may or may not be into normally, right? Joining different workshops outside, free ones, obviously, not the paid ones, right? Again, my goal is to be able to get to where you're trying to get to as cheap as possible and as free as possible. And there's no need to spend money, honestly. Just everything's available online. Everything is out there somewhere. somebody somewhere is hosting a workshop 24/7 in a global scale. Um, but yeah, I mean, feel free to like just work through your resumes, try to put as much projects as you can. It's cool to have personal projects, but it's even better to work on a open source project. um, Try to figure out what libraries, what tools your dream job is using, right? And then go to that open source or go to GitHub and see if there's a open source project or application for that tool set that they're using and start like contributing to that, right? And that will probably have a higher potential of you getting a job than getting a cert for that specific tool set. Because at that point, like, you will have gained industry knowledge and experience. It's the closest thing to, you being able to have that level of expertise is that like, this team is using AWS, for example, and you're like I guess actively contributing to the serverless framework um, GitHub project. Um, and then, you can talk about that during the interview. You can talk about some of your contributions. And that's something that definitely would be brought up during your interview as part of your resume. Is that like, hey, well, what did you do in this project? What did you work on here? And it's going to definitely get some eyes. But also, like, try to craft your resume in a way where it has key key points and keywords that are, in some of the jobs that you're looking for as well. But yeah, a little long-winded answer there. Any other questions from anybody else? Not, I think. Oh, okay, Mary.
Yeah, so you were saying if we have these open source projects on our resume, then we're more attractive as a candidate to the recruiters. So and you were saying not the personal ones are not the key, but mostly building some of these like kind of projects that match the company stack. So like what are we considering aside from that point about like matching up to what the company is using? What other things should we be looking for when we're looking for open source projects that we're going to be a part of and put on our resume? What other like considerations should we think about? I think you've already mentioned like AWS or like one cloud technology and Bodo 3, I think. So you've mentioned certain things that we should consider, but like just generally about the open source project, what should we be considering?
Um, you definitely want to. So whenever you're looking at, first of all, good question. Second of all, whenever you're vetting an open source um, project, try to see the current number of issues there are, right? Because there may be some open source projects that don't have any, you know, I guess, contributors and stuff like that. For example, if we were to look at something right now, let's see, do I have this? Let's try to look through something. GitHub, for example. Let's go through GitHub. Um, I guess this is one like it's open source, it's public, and then like this thing just building something out. So whenever you're having this, and there isn't much contributors, but then you see that you can improve this process, you can easily like fork this, and once you fork it, what I mean by fork is like you just literally press fork right here, and there's so far 10 people that have forked it, and kind of like make your own version of it, right? So the fact that it's open source doesn't mean that like you have to make changes to this and look at the issues, for example, right? um, so and also what I mean by the issues, I just realized that you guys may not know how to use GitHub and what issues are. But usually, like whenever you're looking at an open source project, right, this is usually the main page that you come in. But then there are like things up here. There are like pull requests, issues, and things like that. These are the main things that you should be looking for as well, is to see how many issues there are. And whenever you click on an issue, right, um, you look at some of these things that they're mentioning here. Um, something like this. And then you kind of like see if this is something that you may be interested in to work on. Um, as you can tell, there isn't much examples here of what's going on or what he's trying to ask for. At this point, you will kind of like come in here and kind of like ask them to explain what they're talking about. So like, make it collaborative as much as possible. You're also looking at like, the numbers of forks and stars that there are. Um, and let's go back a little bit. Let's see. Let's look for a project. Let's say we're looking for um, cloud. Let's just put cloud in there. Oh, what the heck? That's odd. Why am I getting throttled? Wait a minute. Okay, that's odd. Really odd. Just log in, I guess. Use the authenticator app. So yeah, whenever you're coming in here, you're usually looking at like, the issue, and then you can add a comment, for example, right? But going back to what we were doing, not just here, we just search cloud. Um, so whenever you're going through this, obviously select the language that you can work on, right? You don't want to pick Go if you can't work on Go. You can kind of filter through and look for like, Python based ones. And you can already see there's like a bunch of good ones coming up, right? Like, cloud formation template, AWS cloud formation. Um, this is a very good one as well. I'm just picking something out. Also, you can tell that this is a good one based on the number of stars there are. There's 4.7K stars. That means there are that many people that have liked it. It's kind of like, looking through, I guess, Instagram. These are like little hearts, tells you how popular they are. And then there's also local stack, which is also a good one. But like, yeah, just go through here, pick a language that you're comfortable with. I selected Python, and after selecting Python, you'll see like different types of open source projects out there. Some of them may not be open source. They may just be like, some random person's project that's just up there. Like the one I showed you earlier, that was just some random person's project that I kind of found interesting. And I was kind of like, looking through. But you're looking through like some of these ones, like, 375 stars, 10.1K stars. These are all good ones, right? 4K stars. You don't want to pick like, 10 stars. Try to go for like at least double or triple digits, right? Try to go for like, 1,000 or more if possible. But if you can't find one and one has 500, that's also okay. Like, depending on the project and whatnot. Like I said, also there's AWS CLI, which is a good one. AWS. This is AWS specific. See how the organization is AWS. This is straight from Amazon. Um, this is also a good one. Cloud Custodian. Um, that's also a really good one, actually. Cloud Custodian. Damn. Cloudflare, that's also a good one. But yeah, talking about cloud formation, that was the one that I was talking about. I clicked on this. I'll click on it here. Um, so you come here and then you can see forks and then you can see stars. Obviously, there's a lot of stars and there's like 289 people watching. So this is a very active one. So this is a really good one to have too, right? That you can kind of contribute to. And then the next thing that you will do after picking something like this is come and look at some of the issues and try to figure out, which ones are ones that you can do. Or another thing that you can do is you come to cloud formation template, and then they usually have a guide how to kind of like submit a template or work on one. Just follow through and install it. They also have cloud formation. Yeah, this is a good one too. Cloud formation. Cause see like how the stars are 589. but this is from a organization from AWS, so it's already trusted. This is a good one as well. So I'll look at this one, and then let's see. I'm trying to look for one that gives you a way to test and stuff like that. And this one doesn't necessarily give you a list. This is just like a list of formation templates and whatnot. This may not be a good example. Go back to this. Um, yeah. So like for example, like um, this one has ways to submit it, but not necessarily test it. There are some projects out there that will show you like have descriptions down here that show you how to install it, how to test it, and how to run it. And let's say after you have ran it, right, and tested it, um, you can play around with it and try to figure out an issue yourself. And once you figure out an issue, you come here and click new issue. When you click new issue, you're able to kind of like, um, talk about give it a title and talk about the issue and submit it to the community where it will show up right here. Well, it won't show up here. It has to get authorized to show up here. But let's say we're now looking for ways to fix something. Uh, Update and typo. Okay, first of all, I know what I'm looking for, so I'm trying to look for something that's easy. But if you're not sure what you're looking for, just like start going through the list from top down, right? Just look through an issue and see what's happening. Um, See how this is due to inactivity. This will be closed, I guess, because there wasn't much description here. So you come back here, and I'm trying to look for this dates and typo. So this one is a little better. It looks like. hmm, Yeah, this is also inactive. What the heck? Yeah, so like if you pick an issue where you're like, okay, this looks interesting, I'm not sure, just come here down here and be like, hey, I'd like to know more about this. What's this issue all about? And ask the author to kind of explain themselves a little better. So that's something that you can do as well. This was a horrible example. Looking for something that would be more doable for like somebody that's new. Um, so this one seems like it's a little better. I just got a message from my global team. It's like 8 o'clock here, and I'm getting messages from work now. Crazy, right? But I'm used to it, so and
Sorry,
also I
I didn't
enjoy it.
I didn't want to take up too much of your time. I just wanted to say thank you. So like
Yeah, no worries.
I get the idea of the way that we need to be looking at the projects and figure out what to select, right? So thank you for going through that.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out something that would be easy to look through, right? Um, I guess this would be a good one. Yeah, so this is a good one. Like like this one has a example of how to run it and how to install it. So this would be a really good one to work on. For example, a word counter, right? Or word cloud, something very simple, very easy and cheesy. Um, it shows you how it would run as well. So you can install this and go through it and build it out and test it and run it on your own computer. Once you do that, you can start like figuring out an issue. If you can't figure the issue out, then what you would do is that you would come through here and try to figure out, like for example, this test failed on whatever, right? You will then come here and then try to run the exact same test based on some of the parameters here and see what went wrong and if you're facing the same test issue. Um, and if you are facing the same test issue, try to see if you can find out why it's failing. And it seems like it's failing because beautiful. Seems like it's facing failing at this generator function. Yeah. So generators are a concept in Python. And it seems like it fails at this level. So you kind of like go into it and try to figure out why it fails and put like print statements and whatnot and debugging statements and try to help solve this problem basically. And then once you solve it, you'll be able to push your solution and it will show up here and it will be like, yeah, fix whatever, right? Like this is very simple, right? This guy fixed the links from the README where they just push the code change, which the change looks like this. This is what it used to be. This is what it is now. So one thing about GitHub is it shows you what the change was, and you can see the conversations and whatnot and the push issues. So this is how you can contribute to GitHub as well, um, and kind of put up solutions. But yeah, with that being said, if there are no more questions, I am going to also head out and answer some work emails now. Um, Thanks so much for joining. You guys have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.